Hey folks, Matt Easton here, Scholar Gladiatoria and Eastern Antique Arms. That's where I buy and sell antique swords like these on my wall. And I have learnt from prior experience that some of you out there enjoy it when I do unboxing videos, but where I talk about the things coming out of the box. Well, because I buy and sell antiques from various places, private collections, auctions, all sorts of shops, all sorts of stuff, I end up with stock coming through my hands, which is great. That's one of the reasons that I have the experience with swords and antique weapons as much as I do, because I have a lot of stuff not just sitting in my collection but that actually goes through my collection as well. And so here I have a massive and quite heavy box. Oh gosh. But rather than grunting and groaning and you watching me lift a box up and down, what I thought I'd do is I'll show you the objects as they come out, and we'll try and keep, I can't remember, I think there's about 5 or 6 swords in this box. I think it's all swords. Again, because I buy a lot of stuff and I sell a fair amount of stuff, I'm not always sure what's coming out of the box, and very often I've only seen fairly sketchy photos and descriptions and stuff like this. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this box. I don't 100% know, and I certainly can't remember. I've got a terrible memory anyway. So let's have a look and see what's inside this massive box. First up, I just have to say, yes, there is no polystyrene popcorn, or whatever it's called, peanuts, I think some people call it, packing peanuts, that's it. This is the type of packing material I like, paper and bubble wrap. Yay, good stuff, easy to dispose of, even better to reuse. So lots and lots of bubble wrap in here. Ah, right. So I've had this before on, I think the last video I did on this very same topic. What they've done is they've wrapped all of the swords in bubble wrap, which is absolutely fine, have no problem with that. And they have then taped them all together, so they're one congealed lump of swords, much like the throne on Game of Thrones, which actually I intend to talk about at some point. But anyway, right, let's, Jesus. While I grunt and groan and pull this out, I think I'll do a little bit of an edit. So this is what a congealed lump of swords looks like when wrapped in bubble wrap. If you've ever wondered, this is how swords are born, at least in my house. So here we have the first sword for you. I'm not entirely sure what this is going to be. I can see that it's been taped to a board, a piece of cardboard in this case. Just a little safety message for anyone sending swords by courier, by post, whatever. Do make sure if they don't have a scabbard on them, or even if they do, that you wrap them safely, okay? Particularly swords or knives or anything else with a point on it, you do not want it coming out of the package for the safety of the couriers, but also for the safety of the object as well. I have once had 2 swords delivered to me that had been put with one point at one end and one point at the other end, and both points have come out of both ends. There was no blood on the box, so I don't think anyone was injured. But actually both points of both swords were damaged because they'd been dumped on the ground. So make sure you wrap up those tips as safely as you possibly can using wood or whatever, and tape it to the blade so that the point isn't at the end. There's some other kind of blunt object at the end. Right, so let's get opening this. So let's get my knife out again. Always cut away from you, or sideways or something. This is an interesting sword. I genuinely have no idea what this is. Okay, it's not in great condition. It's quite pitted, but oh, look at that. Right, okay, so I'm not entirely sure what this is. Oh, it must be Prussian. Let's pull that label off so we don't give anyone any free advertising. It must be Prussian, I would say. Maybe? I don't know. I thought it was Indian when I first saw it. So usually a combination of a 3-bar hilt with almost like a 1796 style blade, sometimes known as the Paget blade in period, is usually a type of sword made for Indian cavalry when we find them in the United Kingdom. However, this doesn't have a British style guard. There are details of this guard and the shape of the back strap, if you can see there, and the ears and the shape of the grip, that to me scream Prussian. So maybe this is a German or Austrian or some other, perhaps some other part of Europe, Central European maybe. Could potentially be Spanish. I don't know. The Spanish sometimes. Anyway, I'm not really sure what this is. If you know what this is, then let me know. I'll do a bit of research after this video. It's got the remainder of some of the cord. The leather's gone from the grip. This is in what I would describe as relic condition. It's not in good condition at all. It's very pitted. Although I have to say structurally, it's kind of okay. Like you could probably sharpen that up and cut with it if you wanted to. Anyway, let's get on and have a look at the next sword. So next up again, I'm not sure. I can see brass. I think it looks like brass. Looks like a French style hilt. But the blade seems, okay, I do know what this is, you'll be happy to hear. So this is a French 1882 pattern cavalry sword. Quite a nice one actually, yeah. The blade may look dull, but that will easily clean up. There is writing on the spine of the blade. So with French swords, so this style of hilt, which some of you might think that looks like an American sword, well, the American swords, the 1840 and the 1860, for example, were modelled on French swords. Okay, so this has got, I can see it's got inspection marks on the inside there, so it's definitely French. And so, as well as just the general style of it, I'll talk about the blade in a second. I know that this is a French 1882, but additionally, for confirmation for that, French swords pretty much, well, I won't say always, but let's say about 75% of the time, swords and bayonets have writing on the back of the blade that tells you very often the model of the weapon, whether it's a bayonet or a sword, where it was made. The two main factories in France were Châtellerault and Klingenthal. So it's usually one of those, but it's not always. There's Saint-Étienne as well. And sometimes they tell you even the month and the date that the actual specific sword was made, or bayonet. So let's have a look at this one. That it's pretty dull, the writing, but it's made at Châtellerault. So it says, they abbreviate the words, but it essentially means made at the factory of arms de Chat, which is Châtellerault. Juillet, it looks like July 1885. And then it says the shortened version of cavalry Legier. French viewers, what does that mean? I see that cavalry Legier or something like that. Not Legier, my French pronunciation is very bad, sorry. Légère, maybe? I'm not really sure what that means, but I often see it on stuff. Model, M-le, model 1882. So it's the 1882 model, which I knew from looking at it anyway, but this was specifically made in July 1885, which is nice. Nice to know that. Now this, I have shown 1822 patterns before, which have the identical same hilt as this, but they have a saber blade, okay, a curved, more typical saber blade, sometimes with the Montmorency secondary fuller, sometimes without. Now this straight version is in 1882, the French government decided to equip a fair number of their cavalry, light cavalry, with this type of straight thrusting blade. And can you cut with it? Yes, you could, but it's not as good at cutting as the old 1882 saber blade. So this is more of a dedicated thruster, still with some cutting capacity. It's a nice sword anyway. It's all nice and solid. That'll be going up on my website because it doesn't really fit in my collection. But it's a nice example. I'll clean it up. I'll probably clean the blade a little. I'll polish up the brass a little bit. And that will go on my website. Anyway, that's a nice example. Let's have a look at the next sword. So again, here's the next one. This feels quite light. I don't know what's inside it though. I can see it's a 3-bar hilt. Brown tape and bubble wrap, my favourite combo. Ooh. Shagreen in good condition. Oh wow, that's interesting. So it's not a 3-bar hilt, it's a 4-bar hilt. Whoa, that is cool. Right, I'm not even sure what this is. Let's have a look. Okay, so it's got Latin or Italian written on the blade, and I think that's a southern, oh no, Hungarian. Wow, okay, so it's a Hungarian, officer's cavalry saber. That is nice. So it's a pipe back blade. You'll notice, incidentally, it's a slimmer version of this blade on the wall behind me. So it's a pipe back blade with a yeoman or false edge, whatever you want to call it. The grip looks very British actually. It's sort of greyish black shagreen with exactly the same style of wire wrap that British swords have on them. But the style of the hilt looks more French actually. It's a little bit like in France what we would be commonly regarded as the 1882 infantry, not cavalry like that last sword we saw, but 1882 infantry officer's hilt. But that itself was modelled on an earlier style of non-regulation French officer's hilt, which was used on both cavalry and infantry officers' swords and used in North Africa, specifically Morocco, Algeria, etc. So a kind of, whereas in Britain we had a lot of non-regulation swords for officers serving in India, in France they had a lot of non-regulation swords for officers serving in North Africa because that was where their main colonies were. That and the Caribbean, of course. So yeah, very nice. It's kind of partly French, partly British, British inspired, and it has a slight look of, it looks a little bit Prussian as well, I suppose. So that kind of makes sense when you think of Austro-Hungary. What were its influences? It's interesting that it's Hungary because I would have thought it would have had a Austrian style to it, but it says pro patriot libertad vitam, okay, which means for country, liberty and life, I think, if my school Latin stands up. And on the other side it says patrona Hungaria Virgo Maria, which I guess means the country of Hungary, Virgin Mary. Very, very interesting sword, and it's got some lovely markings. It's actually got the Virgin, what looks like the crowned Virgin Mary with light springing out of her head. Obviously you won't be able to see that on the camera, but describe it. Cleaned up, this could be a very, very nice sword. It's a bit grubby at the moment, but it's a really nice thing. Anyway, I'm happy with that. I'll take that along to, I'm running a saber class tonight, I'll take that along to show the guys. It's quite an interesting thing. I do have some Hungarian friends who might start offering me money for this, but anyway, let's see. I like that a lot. Anyway, very nice saber. Let's move on to the next one. So here's the next one again. I don't know what this is. Oh, it looks like an 1885 or an 1890. It probably is. Why am I not using my knife? I don't know. It's more fun tearing it. Oh no, I was completely wrong. It is. Why did I do that silly voice? Have I got a scabbard in there? No, it's been put in cardboard. Well, is it a cutlass or is it a lead cutter? That's the question. What is a lead cutter? A lead cutter, most people watching this channel will know that a lead cutter is for cutting bars of lead, for doing sword feats, also used for cutting pigs and sheep and other things in half, for practice and displaying your skill. And so that's interesting. To me, so it has the basic shape and form of a large 1845 pattern cutlass, naval cutlass, but it is chunkier and heavier. So is it a lead cutter? I'm not really sure, but not only that, it has foreign, by Jove, markings on it. These are not British markings. So I think this is another country's copy of a British 1845, but it's unusually heavy, or maybe they were making a lead cutter. The only thing is, it seems never to have been sharpened, and lead cutters, in my experience, are always made sharp from the outset. Now the markings, shouldn't think you'll be able to see these, but let's give it a try. Maybe you can. There we go. Stop focusing on my face. Hold on, I moved my face out of the way. There we go. So can you see the markings there? It seems to be the letter K. Oh, the focus is not going to comply. Maybe you can see there. There we go. The letter K and then an I and an L and a crown. So my guess is this is Danish or Swedish. I'm guessing it's Scandinavian copy of a British lead cutter, but it's it's got another mark there with a crown with a K underneath. What does the K stand for? I don't know. I can't think of a Scandinavian king with a K, but I'm sure a little bit of internet searching will solve that problem. So there we go. I suspect that's a Scandinavian copy of a British 1845 pattern cutlass. A nice thing, nice condition, it's all solid. Whoa, it is heavy though, it feels like a lead cutter to me. Anyway, let's move on to the next object. So these only 2 left, this is the penultimate one. You can see a backstrap and a pommel there. Let's see what this one is. I think I might have to get the knife out for this one. I really can't remember what's in these. Right, okay, so I'm pretty sure I know what this is. This is an Indian cavalry sword. Yep, it certainly is. Let's pull those labels off. So it's a, shall we say, brass or other, there's my lights, brass or other non-ferrous, that's copper alloy, I can see. It's nickel-plated copper alloy, it looks like. 3-bar hilt with a Paget, what I was talking about earlier, the Paget style saber blade. So a broad, almost like a 1796 blade with a cast copper alloy hilt, shagreen grip, probably dates to about 1900. Everything's all solid and tight in it. Yeah, you know, that's what they were making. I think some of these certainly, in fact, I think a fair number of these were actually made in India for Indian cavalry, and this is an example of that type. So there we go. The Indian cavalry, whereas the British cavalry was switching to more thrust-centric, straighter swords, the Indian cavalry preferred their saber blades and preferred hacking and slashing, and so that's the swords that they got because that suited their style of fighting better. So there we go. It's a Paget bladed Indian cavalry saber. Let's move on to the final sword. So here is the last one. What is in here? I do not know. Knife out again, I think. There we go. Looks like an 1853, and it is. Put that label off. Right. So it is an 1853. It's got a slightly unusual grip actually. So a lot of 1853 pattern cavalry swords. So this is a British 1853 pattern. A lot of them have quite fat grips, and it was one of the criticisms of them was that the grips were sometimes too cylindrical and would turn in the hand when you're trying to deliver a cut, which would give poor edge alignment obviously and fluff your cut, mess up your cut. But this and a few others I've seen, it's covered in grease incidentally. I'm gonna have to clean my hands off when I finish this. Have flatter grips, and when you've got a flatter grip you can feel the edge perfectly, and actually that feels quite nice, that one. I also notice unusually that this specific example has, let's see if I can get it to focus, has, can you see these lines that go up? They're kind of filed in, I was going to say chiseled, but they're filed, I think, filed in here, and they're just decorative. But in my experience, ones with filed lines here tend to be lighter and better quality than the ones without. The ones without seem to be more mass produced and tend to be a little bit heavier. So anyway, yeah, it's in average condition. It's not in fantastic condition, but it's very dirty. So once I've cleaned it off, I'll have a better idea. But it's a nice sword. It certainly feels nicer in the hand than most 1853 patterns do. It seems to be more finely made. So yeah, so that's nice. I'm happy with that. So there we go. That was my, how many swords did I get now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 swords. There we go. So 6 swords in a box. I hope you enjoyed the unboxing. I hope I wasn't too long and I didn't blather too much. Some of these definitely, probably most of them, maybe 5 of them will be going on the Eastern Antique Arms website in due course. Link below, of course. We've also got a Facebook page, and go and give us a like on Facebook, and then you can see when I put updates, when I put new stock on the website. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this was somewhat interesting, and I'll see you for the next video. Bye folks. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. We have extra videos on Patreon, and you can follow us on Facebook.